Ball game. It's going down, baby. Here's wifey. She's trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure it out myself. Let's make it happen, y'all. It's your boy in the building. You already know. What's up, guys? We're headed our way to the rooftop. Special access, special passes. You know what it is, baby. Trendsetters Network in the building. This is what we do. Come join us. Come join us. Yes, sir. Headed to the rooftop. On our way to do this boat ride up here in Chicago, baby. We've been filling it up. Caught the game yesterday. Cubs won 1-0. So, you know, we're just doing our thing, having fun out here. TSN in the building. Trendsetters Network. This is what we do, baby.
Tour guide, friend, mentor, and resident question answerer over the next 90 minutes on our 90-minute river architecture tour, as we see all three branches of the Chicago River, the main branch, the north branch, and the south branch. But before we get into all that, there's a couple quick safety things on my end that I just want to take care of real fast, and then we'll just jump into it, because I have so much to say to you, and I really have 90 minutes to do it. So, firstly, I hate to feed it into the ground. I just want to make sure we all know there is a lower level on this boat with a full bar and 2 bathrooms downstairs to access that lower level with the 2 bathrooms and the full bar. 1 set of steps in the back, 2 sets of steps up front. Second thing, you are not limited to the seat. We're going to go with that. It's got a central elevator core or stem of the flower, and the rooms are all shaped like flower petals, right, thinner at the door and wider as you get out towards the balconies. At the base of these 2 identical 43-story towers, these condo towers here, you have these 15-story parking garages at the base. You cannot park your own car here. They have highly trained professional valets that have to do it for you. And because of that, thankfully, knock on wood, nobody has driven off of it on accident. It's happened on purpose a few times, different movies and stuff like that. I swear they wait until I'm coming under the bridge. We here in Chicago, we have 4 seasons like everybody else. We have pre-winter, winter, post-winter, and construction. Welcome to construction. But here on the right-hand side, you guys see right here where it says RPM Seafood here at the bottom? So this is the American Bar Association Tower. Originally the Quaker Tower, came up here in 1984 by architect Bruce Graham, now home of the American Bar Association. Speaking of bar, 2 restaurants at the base, quick shout to those. RPM Seafood is objectively the best seafood in the city. It is also the most expensive seafood in the city, but you get what you pay for. And then underneath that is Pizzeria Portofino, a really nice Italian spot right next to the Chicago River there. It's a little hard to get into, but it's worth the wait. Here on the right-hand side, though, a relic of Chicago history. If you guys had been here like 100 years ago, you would have seen many of this type of building lining the Chicago River. Designed in 1914 by George Nimmons, this is the Reed Murdoch Center. You are looking at the last remaining warehouse building on the main branch, although not a warehouse inside anymore. It's also noticeably asymmetrical. They had to remove a vertical bay from the west side, which is like a vertical column or like a section, to remove it from the west side of the building in 1922 to make room for the then brand new LaSalle Street Bridge. We're passing underneath right now. On the other side of the LaSalle Street Bridge, let's keep looking here on the right-hand side for a little bit more. So this over here on the right-hand side is 300 North LaSalle. 300 North LaSalle here is one of our many green and environmentally friendly buildings in the city of Chicago. It is a 72-story platinum LEED certified high-rise, which if you don't know is a pretty big deal. So LEED is L-E-E-D for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. Platinum is the highest certification that you can get, and they don't just hand that out. It gets that way because of how it cools the building off. Because believe it or not, there are no air-conditioned units in the tower. To cool it off, they actually just use the river water. They have a system that cycles the water from the Chicago River through the side of the whole building, cools it off considerably to the average temperature of the river, which is about 65 degrees, spits it back out into the river, and it comes back in a little bit cleaner as well. Here on our right-hand side is the legendary Merchandise Mart right here in downtown Chicago. Finished in 1927 by firm Graham, Anderson, Probst & White. A perfect example of the Art Deco style of architecture, which we're going to see a lot of today. So Art Deco is characterized by strong vertical lines that take your eyes up, geometric ornamentation, setbacks, and limestone skin, and built between 1920 and 1933. These heads up front are the heads of famous Chicago merchants like Montgomery Ward and Marshall Fields. But the Merchandise Mart, when it first came up here in 1927, was the largest building in the world by square footage. Today, it is the second largest limestone building in the United States, so still pretty big. It's losing to the Pentagon. It's got 4.25 million square feet of space. That is 8 miles of internal hallways and a footprint of 5 entire city blocks. Over here on our right-hand side is an area of town called Wolf Point, which has been undergoing a lot of renovations here over the last 7 or 8 years or so. So we see Wolf Point East right here in the corner. It's a 70-story residential high-rise. The bottom 3 floors, though, are a mix of a bunch of recreation space for the folks up top. Like they have their own personal private bar with their own lounge, spa, gym, swimming pool, tanning deck, all sorts of great amenities available for them. There's a cool coffee shop at the bottom that's available for everybody. It's called a Blue Bottle Coffee. It's like a California-based coffee company, but a really awesome cup of joe down there. Highly recommend. But here on our right-hand side, right here in the corner, is the Salesforce Tower. Just finished last year, so it is brand spanking new. 80 stories tall, all office space. They're working on moving people and things inside of it right now, and they want to be fully moved into by next spring. The Salesforce company isn't going to be in the entire building, but they will be in a lot of it. So we are starting to head down the north branch of the Chicago River. As we go down the north branch, I want to apologize preemptively here. It's going to be a lot of left, right, left, right, left, right, so bear with me. Here on the left-hand side, with an archway at the base and a curved blue glass facade, right here on the point of the 3 branches of the Chicago River. This is River Point. You will find out that we are very good at naming stuff. So, River Point finished in 2016. It's another one of our green buildings. That one made out of 60% recycled materials, giving it another highly coveted platinum LEED certification. Here on the left-hand side, you guys see these residences right here along the riverbend? These are the residences at Riverbend. See what I mean? Designed in 2001 by architect James DiStefano. They got townhomes at the bottom, condos at the top. And the entryways for the townhouses and the hallways for the condos are, from our perspective, behind it, which was originally to give them an amazing view of the city, which was a spectacular view. Until 2015. When Wolf Point West right here comes up right in its front lawn by BLK Architects and unfortunately takes the view all for their own. However, a bit of architectural karmic justice has happened because the Salesforce Tower and Wolf Point East are both taller than Wolf Point West and are both built right in front of it, so they get to see what that feels like. Here on our left-hand side, this red brick building over here is the Fulton House building, the oldest building you guys will see today, designed in 1898 by Frank Abbott, remodeled by architect Harry Weiss in 1982. You guys see the starfish around the windows there, and then you see those round porthole windows along the top there? Harry Weiss loved nautical themes on his buildings, and we see them even more clearly defined right here on the left-hand side, these cottages along the riverside, the Chicago River Cottages, designed in 1988. I mean, they've got their own marina, which I've never seen them use a single time, but they still have it, round porthole windows, and you guys see the triangle themes all over it? So the triangles for the same shapes of sails on his beloved sailing ships, because Harry Weiss, as you may have surmised, was also an avid sailor, which is why he liked to mix these nautical themes. Back over here on the right-hand side, we're coming up on the EBC. This is the East Bank Club, designed by Ezra Gordon and Dan Levin in 1979. It is a private upscale health facility, or in English, it's a very expensive gym. Oprah and both of the Obamas still have their annual memberships here that they still pay for. They just haven't been downtown in a minute. But whenever the EBC first came up here in 1979, it didn't look anything like it does right now. On the backhand side facing the river, it was only a concrete wall right into the river. No windows, no walkway, no kayaks, no trees, no ivy, no anything. Because up to and including 1979, it was still a common practice to design your building so that it is facing away from the Chicago River. Because up to and including 1979, the Chicago River was kind of gross, and you didn't really want to look at it, nonetheless when you're running around a track. So, to understand why the EBC looks like it does in the back right now, though, we have to back up to before it was even here, to the mid-1960s, where we in the United States passed what's called the Clean Water Act, where we as a nation collectively started to take better care of our nation's waterways and our act around them. That didn't really catch on in Chicago until like the early 1980s, and that's because that's when we started to build like more residences along the river, and that's when they wanted to join in on the fun. Put some new windows up with the trees and the ivy and the walkway and the new residential tower in 2002, really just to open it up to the river behind it, because now the river is decidedly not gross anymore. A quick FAQ, here on the left-hand side, Alex, does anybody live in the little green house next to the Grand Avenue Bridge? The answer is no, unfortunately, but that would be very cool. It's a bridge house for the Grand Avenue Bridge. As we continue on the tour, pay note of all of the bridges we pass underneath. Every single one of our bridges have unique individual bridge houses that are designed to blend into the areas around them. And since this is a mostly residential area, the bridge houses on the Grand Avenue Bridge are designed to look like tiny little residential homes. Here on our right-hand side, these are the Chicago Riverbank locks, a great example of what you call adaptive reuse. So it used to be a printing press building, but instead of tearing it down, they just gutted it from the inside and rebuilt it on the inside from the ground up into something completely different, like condos. You can tell when a building uses that adaptive reuse technique. Usually the tell is like bolted on balconies on the exterior, which look like they were added on as an afterthought, and it's because they weren't. Coming over here on the right-hand side, coming up on a park, it's Montgomery Ward Park, a 4-acre park that includes a dog park and a children's playground. 2 buildings of note inside that I want to tell you about. They both kind of look the same. First, up here on the right-hand side, you guys see up ahead where the chevron designs on the outside? Chevrons are like arrowheads or triangles pointing up. That is Erie on the park. Its sister building coming into view right now, right across from it, both the tiny chevrons going up the balcony there. That is Kingsbury on the park. So Erie and Kingsbury on the park, both designed in 2002 by architect Lucien Lagrange, done in the European industrial style, with their simple 8-story concrete bases and the steel mega frames on the outside designed to make them look unfinished on purpose. Tucked away in the corner, up ahead on the right, you guys see up there, with the white pillar corners and the blue tinted windows? That's the Montgomery, designed in 1979 by Japanese architect Minoru Yamasaki, who in the late 70s was tasked with designing what was the office headquarters for the Montgomery Ward Catalog Company. Aaron Montgomery Ward, owner of said catalog company, had this overarching business philosophy of efficiency. He wanted everything about his company, down to the smallest little detail, to be all about whether or not it was efficient. So Yamasaki, the architect for the office tower, was so inspired by that, he designed the office tower in such a way so that it couldn't have traditional corner offices inside of the tower. The corners house the electrics and the elevator shafts. That way, in theory, nobody would feel more important than the person sitting next to them, and would therefore make everyone work more efficiently, which I think was a pretty solid plan. And it was. It worked out for him for a long time until it didn't, and now it's condos. But, like I said, it used to be the office headquarters for Montgomery Ward. If you don't know who Montgomery Ward is, or just as a refresher, Montgomery Ward was pretty much just Amazon before Amazon was a thing, except on paper, an actual physical catalog. You could order anything you wanted to, have it shipped right to your house. But if you couldn't find what you wanted from Montgomery Ward, there were so many other catalog companies to choose from, especially ones headquartered here in Chicago. Big catalog kings, all called Chicago home, like Montgomery Ward, of course, Marshall Fields, Spiegel, Carson's, Crate and Barrel, and of course the big one, Sears and Roebuck, at one point headquartered here in the city. But I think of all of them, Montgomery Ward had the whole thing figured out. He had 3 buildings down the North Branch. We saw the Montgomery. Go to right-hand side right now is another one. We're coming up here on One River Place. Designed in 1930 by architect William McCauley as an 8-story Art Deco add-on to the warehouse, which is just up ahead. In the early 1950s, One River Place here became a bit more office space for Montgomery Ward until they moved all the offices to the Montgomery behind it in 1979. After the company declared bankruptcy in 2000 and left the city in 2002, these became residential shortly thereafter. Again, you can tell with the bolted-on balconies on the outside, another example of that adaptive reuse. Coming over here on our right-hand side, we're coming up on the Domain, the original warehouse for the Montgomery Ward Catalog Company. It's a mixed-use building today, which means it's a mix of residential and commercial space. Groupon slapped their name up top in 2015 when they bought a lot of the top floor offices. They bought the rights to put their name onto the building, but not the naming rights to the building, which is a very small but a very important distinction. so it's still called its historic name of the domain. While they were cleaning out the domain, after Montgomery Ward left, so this is they declared bankruptcy in 2000, totally out of here in 2002, and then they started to clean out the warehouse. While they were cleaning it, they found around 500 pairs of roller skates. Not like the roller derby ones you might be thinking of. I don't know if you've seen them or if you know what I'm talking about. You know, like the old school ones, you gotta put in your sneaker and you lock them in with a key. They found like 500 pairs of those. Again, on the company's noted efficiency, because he wanted everybody who worked in the warehouse to know how to roller skate. That way, in theory, you could go down all 1.2 million square feet of the domain here as quickly and efficiently as humanly possible. And that same philosophy with the same old roller skates stuck with the company until they closed for good in 2002. Here on our right-hand side is our only island in Chicago. It's Goose Island, originally called Ogden Island after first mayor William B. Ogden dug the canal, kind of back behind us there, down to find clay to make bricks for buildings, and created the island in the process of digging all that out. Called Goose Island, though, because Irish settlers were the first to live on it, and they would raise all these geese all the time. Everyone who lived around here back in the day would complain about the noise that caused all the time, and chose instead to call it Goose Island. But the name designed to make fun of it caught on and stuck, and that's what it's officially stuck with today. But you won't be finding any pina coladas down there. It's more of like an industrial island. Like there's a top-notch government research facility over there with the Wrigley Gum Corporation. It's now headquartered on Goose Island. They got a new tech facility and offices down there, like 2010. It would be a little bit down towards like North Avenue, but we're not going down that far. Also, of course, you have the Goose Island Distillery, some local craft beer down there. It's not actually on the island. It's just across the one bridge north of it, but it's close enough to count. Also, shameless plug, we have it on tap downstairs. So if we try some local craft beer, hey, now's the chance. Go downstairs, check it out. Speaking of which, we're heading back down the North Branch to the Chicago River. Right now, I'm actually going to take a brief pause on buildings. Instead, we're going to talk about some history. I only announced this so that you know if you guys wanted to go downstairs, now's the perfect time. Because we pipe the audio everywhere in the boat, and you won't miss any buildings, and you won't miss any history. We pipe the audio even into the bathrooms. So if you guys go downstairs, you're not going to miss anything. So when we're talking about the history of the city, I'm going to start in 1673. Two French explorers, Marquette and Joliet, were sent on a quest by New France, aka East Canada, to go explore the Mississippi River. They got as far south as the Arkansas River, turned around, made it back to modern-day Utica, Illinois, and it was there they were approached by a friendly group of local Native Americans called the Potawatomi, who showed them a shortcut to what they called the Great Sea, which today we call Lake Michigan. So those two explorers then became the first two non-Native American human beings to step foot on the swampland that would soon become Chicago, Illinois. 1779, Chicago got its first permanent non-Native American resident. His name was Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, forever known as the Father of Chicago. He was a Frenchman of Haitian descent, married a local native Potawatomi princess, learned their language and their culture, and existed with them in and around their tribe up until he left the area in 1800. 1803, Fort Dearborn is constructed, the first military fort in the newly acquired Midwest. 1803 was the same year as the Louisiana Purchase. So Fort Dearborn marked the beginning of the exploration of some of the Midwest and Northern Midwest territories, and that started right here in Chicago. You guys can see where even today. So right across the street from where we took off from, on the corner of Wacker Drive and Michigan Avenue, there are bronze indentations on the sidewalk that will show you where garrison of Fort Dearborn once stood. Burned down first during the War of 1812, but rebuilt by 1833, which is when Chicago officially became a town, an official place to live in 1833, with a population of around 300 people. 1837, 4 years after that, we're officially the city of Chicago, the population just going over 4,100 people. 1858, Fort Dearborn is burned down a second time, this time on purpose by the city, because a controlled burn was the quickest way to get rid of it, and we didn't really need it anymore. Speaking of fire, bit of foreshadowing, 1871, we have the Great Chicago Fire. Now, by the end of this story, you guys are going to know all about the Chicago Fire, I promise. Just not right now. I'm going to wait until we're a little bit closer to where the fire started. We'll actually be able to see a visual marker on the south branch of the river that will show you exactly where the fire began, and I want to tell you guys about it when we get there, so we'll just talk about it when we get down there. But just to skip to the end real fast. This fire burned down 2/3 of the city of Chicago. 66% of the city of Chicago burnt to the ground in 2 days. 100,000 people left homeless, 17,000 buildings destroyed. Cost the city, in today's money, approximately $4.2 billion worth of damages. And afterwards, we needed to rebuild. And we needed something to bring Chicago back on the map. And that was the upcoming World's Columbian Exposition of 1893, which is commonly nicknamed and referred to as the World's Fair of 1893. Personally, though, I think that's a little weird to call it that, because the United States was the only country in the entire world to be invited to the World's Fair, so semantics, I guess. But this was sort of like the United States' cultural and technological answer to the World's Fair of 1889 that was held in Paris. So there were 7 U.S. cities trying to get the fair in our respective towns. It was Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Boston, New York, St. Louis, D.C., and Chicago. And we all sent our best politicians to Congress in 1890 to start lobbying for the rights to have the fair here instead of somewhere else. The fair was supposed to begin in 1892 on the 400th anniversary of Columbus's expedition. But by the time the original start time for this fair started to roll around, a funny thing started to happen. Chicago politicians would not stop talking. We could not stop lobbying for this fair, in all honesty, even if we wanted to. Because getting the fair in Chicago for us was life or death. There was no better way to bring that many people into the city, get an interest in it, and help us rebuild after our tragic fires. We knew that we absolutely must win. And our strategy was pretty simple, honestly. Just keep talking. And you know what? We are really good at that one. And that's what we did. We just talked day in, day out, stood up, sat down, filibustered in hours-long shifts, talking to whoever about whatever, just to constantly lobby this fair into the ground, which is exactly what happened in 1893. A year later, but we still got it, and that's what counts. Prompting New York journalist Charles Dana to famously say that New York had lost the fair to those windy windbags from that windy city. So our nickname of the Windy City, believe it or not, doesn't really have anything to do with wind velocity, but more to do with our windbag politicians filled to the brim with hot air. We are pretty windy though. Quick side note. So the Weather Channel took a census a couple years ago to try to figure out like what the windiest city in the United States was as per like highest average recorded annual wind speeds. Chicago is actually number 50 in the windiest cities in the U.S. So we're up there, which is not the windiest city. The windiest city in the United States is Amarillo, Texas. The more you know. So we got the fair in 1893. Took place in Jackson Park on the south shore of the city of Chicago. The architect and director planning for this fair was famous Chicago architect Daniel Burnham, who was faced with a very interesting problem. The population of the United States at this point was about 60 million people, 60 million. Over the course of May to October of 1893, one fair in the city, you guys would see 28 million visitors. And Daniel Burnham had to figure out how to cram half the population of the country into Jackson Park over 6 months, which he did, amazingly, by building a temporary city down there out of a temporary material called staff, which is wood and plaster. Built about 200 of these. Staff, wood and plaster, very easy to build with, very easy to tear down, and he painted everything white because white was the cheapest paint available at the time, and Daniel Burnham did not have the time, money, or patience to deliberate otherwise, so he just painted everything white, which gave the area the nickname you may have heard of, the White City. The landscape architect for the White City was Frederick Law Olmsted, the same guy who designed Central Park in New York. It's because of him, it was this beautiful place to walk around and see the sights. Sights such as the original Ferris wheel, 264 feet in diameter, could fit 1,800 people inside, took an hour per rotation and cost a nickel per ride, which today is like $12.50, which is actually cheaper than the one at Navy Pier right now, so not such a bad deal after all. Also debuting at this fair, arguably the most important invention in the history of the world, electricity. Not only did Nikola Tesla first publicly debut the alternating current here, Thomas Edison waltzes in with a working version of the light bulb, which they used to light up the White City at night. Also, a whole bunch of stuff in no particular order. You got Aunt Jemima's pancake mix, spray paint, the dishwasher, Cracker Jacks, Wrigley's Juicy Fruit Gum, the zipper, PBR, the brownie, the Tootsie Roll, peanut butter, the electric chair. One of these things is not like the other, but we are starting to head down the south branch of the Chicago River. More architecture to see, so hold on to your hats. Here we go. Real quick though, if you guys have any questions about anything we've seen or will see or maybe talk about, hold on to that. We're going to have a time for questions, but we turn around by Chinatown here in a little bit. So, here on our right-hand side, the building I'm sure we're all looking at right now, the one that looks like it's built upside down, this is 150 North Riverside Plaza, finished in 2017. It's 54 stories tall, which is about 752 feet. It's 120 feet wide, except for the base, which is 40 feet wide. How it keeps itself upright lies in the top of the tower itself. In the top floor, there's nobody in the top floor. There are instead 4 giant metal boxes that are filled with a combined total of 180,000 gallons of water. With me so far? These boxes of water at the top sit on top of what is essentially a movable computerized track that can determine any amount of wind sway from the top of the tower, and then automatically adjust those boxes filled with water to shift to the opposite side of the tower. And so, the counteracting sloshing motion of the water inside the wall against the opposite side of the box there will counteract the weight of the sway exactly, and keeps the entire thing upright through gravity. That is called a mass damper system. Specifically, that is a tuned mass damper system. Tuned just means it's controlled by a computer and is not entirely gravity dependent. Over here on our right hand side, 100 North Riverside, the old Boeing headquarters, built and designed on top of the railroad over here in 1990 by firm Perkins and Will. Boeing moved in 1998. They liked it so much they bought the building in 2003, and then they vacated it just last year, so a lot of their space is now empty. Architecturally speaking, though, something pretty weird is happening. So you guys see these steps here on the corner? So on the other side of the wall from the steps are the switching track for Union Station, and the railroad that the building goes on top of. So one of the most important rules when you're building on top of a railroad is that you cannot obstruct a switching track, no matter what. So in order to build on top of one, they had to get a little creative. I hate to ask you to do this, but for the one and only time of the tour, I'm afraid I'm going to ask you to turn around. If you look back to our right at the top of the Boeing headquarters, see at the top, see a large steel X. That is one of 5 wide horizontal trusses. What a truss does is it holds weight. So think of those like 5 fingers of a giant hand, since there's 5 of them, 5 fingers of a giant hand that reach down, pinch that corner of the building where the Boeing sign is, and holds all the weight that would be going down into that corner of the ground, instead distributed evenly between the 5 horizontal trusses at the top. Here on our right-hand side, 2 North Riverside Plaza, finished in 1929. Another beautiful Art Deco building on the south branch of the Chicago River. It was actually originally the headquarters for the Chicago Daily News, one of our many newspaper companies back in the day. 2 North Riverside back there was also the first building built on top of the railroad rights here in the city. And we're going to see a few more of those here on our right-hand side. So we have Gateway Center 1 and Gateway Center 2 up ahead of us on our right in 1965 and 1967. They are both identical 25-story black box office towers designed by the same guy, Bruce Graham. But what I find infinitely more interesting is what's happening underneath. You guys see these lights and trains down below? This is Union Station, one of our 2 major train stations downtown. The other one is Ogilvy, which is like a few blocks behind it. Every building built on top of Union Station, starting with the Boeing headquarters headed 8 blocks south, which is down this way, is all built to be soundproof, vibration-proof, and diesel fume-proof. In the case of 1 and 2, the diesel fumes are actually vented through the roof of Union Station and then through the corners and the tops of the buildings themselves, so the folks inside don't actually hear, feel, or smell anything at all from the railroad below. A quick shout to Ogilvy, our other train station, which again is about 3 blocks behind where Union Station is here, but on the same side of the city, Ogilvy, because inside of it has got one of my favorite lunch spots in the whole city. It's called the Chicago French Market. It's like this indoor international food court with food stands from all around the world. A really cool place to check out. Highly recommend this, the Chicago French Market. But here on our right-hand side, we're coming up on Gateway Center 3, now home of the Fifth Third's Bank Center. It used to be home to the Mid-America Commodity Exchange. On the outside of Gateway 3, you have what's called precast paneling. So precast just means replaceable. So if any of these granite panels on Gateway 3 are ever damaged, they could just take them off and replace them with panels of the same shape, material, and color. Think like giant architectural Legos. But you'd also do that to change the look of the building, which is exactly what they did in 2015. They left the bottom 2 floors the original gray, but replaced most of them with a stark ivory white, just to help it pop out a little bit more, just to zhuzh it up a little bit. So I hate to do this to you so fast, but take a quick look on our left-hand side for the tallest building in the city. We're going to talk about it in way more detail later on, but I didn't want you to miss it. Here on the left-hand side, in between these 2 buildings, right here to our left and straight up, we are right here at the base of the tallest building in the city of Chicago, coming in at 1,453 feet, 442 meters. It is the WILLIS, pronounced Sears Tower. Finished in 1973 as the Sears Tower. Again, we'll talk about that way more later on today, but didn't want you to miss it as we pass. Here on our right-hand side, we're coming up here on Gateway Center 4. Principal architect James DiStefano in 1984 installed these concave convex glass panels to give it this unique kaleidoscope effect of the city, effectively using the city of Chicago as the ornamentation for his building. Reflected off the side of it, and here on our left is 300 South Wacker. You guys see that red rectangle up here towards the top? This mural on the outside is technically the world's largest "You Are Here" map. You see it? So the light gray is the river and the road, the dark gray is the city, and the red rectangle showcases where 300 South Wacker is and where you are right now. The only reason that it's not actually the largest "You Are Here" map in the world is because it does not have a key. Here on our right-hand side, we're coming up on my personal favorite building in the city of Chicago. It's the old Chicago Post Office. I just love some of these old, huge Art Deco limestone structures. Designed in 1933 by Graham Anderson, Probst and White, the same guys who designed the Merchandise Mart, so they're sort of known for these big, larger-than-life limestone structures. It's got 2.98 million square feet of space inside, which made this the largest operational post office in North America from 1933, when it was completed, until 1996. Because in 1996, after the prolonged success of a little thing called the internet, not a whole lot of people were buying from catalogs anymore. And that's why we had to have one of the largest post offices in the world. Because all these catalog companies located in the city, they had to get all of their product to everywhere, and it all had to come through the Chicago Post Office. However, after 1996 with the internet, we moved out to a smaller, more modern facility. And this one was actually totally abandoned from 1996 until 2016, when at the 11th hour, our savior swoops in from New York, a firm called 601 West, that specializes in taking old government property and turning it into something else. In this case is offices. However, think less cubicles, it's more like open concept, like millennial office space, like hanging gardens and beanbag chairs and personal Starbucks. The whole first floor is open to everybody though, so it's like a little shopping mall sort of area with different shops and restaurants, people to meet, stuff to eat, stuff to do. If you guys go down there, just want to check it out, I would recommend at least going by and sticking your head inside the lobby to catch a glimpse of that beautiful lobby inside. They didn't change the lobby, they just kind of cleaned it up and polished it with solid gold ornamentation inside. Really something to behold. Here on the right-hand side is the new Chicago Post Office, designed in 1996, so unfortunately not quite so new anymore. But despite that, it's still today one of the most automated post offices in the country, with about 11 miles of underground track that these cars will go around. But while we're down here, let's talk about some actual new stuff over here on the left-hand side. So this over here is our newest park in the city called the South Bank. So the South Bank came up in 2019, brought 2 new towers with it. So back there to our left, 2 thin twin towers and one base, one building. That is the Alta Grand Central. And then up here on the left, the big L shape with that sort of muted teal color of the windows behind the new one here. So that's called the Cooper at 29 stories tall. And between both of the new buildings in 2019 here in the South Bank, you have just shy of 1,000 residential units, which makes it a great new place to live, work, and play here in the South Loop area. A quick shout out to the Reed over here on the left-hand side, new building coming up, 35 stories tall, approximately 418 feet. That's going to be a little bit of retail space here coming in at the bottom, and then they're going to have parking, and then all residentials. They're going to be all condominiums, so all units to buy. Here on our left-hand side, you guys see this building kind of curves along with the Chicago River here. Look familiar, because it should. Designed by Bertrand Goldberg, the same guy who designed Marina City. Remember the Flower Towers when we started? Same guy. This is River City in 1989. Originally, it was going to be 4 of the same type of building going down the side of the river, but as this was the first place to live in the South Loop area ever, the city really didn't know if it was going to take off, and they only gave them enough funding to finish 1 of the towers, with the plan to get around to the other 3 at a later time. If it worked, it did work, but they never got around to the other 3. The rentals up top, the first 2 floors is a kindergarten and a preschool, and then you have a public marina right along the Chicago River here. You don't have to live here and have a spot here, but if you do, you get a pretty sweet discount on that. Okay, I'm going to point out something super obscure. I apologize if you miss it, and I will do my very best to describe it. Here on the right-hand side, you guys see over there, there's a radio antenna off the distance. Not the gray one by the power plant here. I'm looking at the radio antenna behind the Marshalls, way off on the right-hand side. You guys see what I'm talking about? So that radio antenna, the red and white radio antenna behind the Marshalls, way off on the right, sits on the site of where once stood a barn that belonged to a woman named Catherine O'Leary, who was largely blamed for the Great Chicago Fire. In other words, that radio antenna marks exactly where the Chicago fire began. The building that radio antenna belongs to right now, and I couldn't make this up if I tried, is the Chicago Fire Department Training Center. That is a real fact. We train our firemen at the exact geographic spot that the Great Chicago Fire began. How about that? But before we start talking too much about the fire, another quick FAQ. Alex, what's this building over here that's falling apart? So this is the last remaining structure of the old Union Station power plant. It's been abandoned for about 30 years, and there's like $2 million of asbestos removal inside of the building. But don't worry, we're totally fine out here. But this is just me speculating from here on out about this. So the city's probably going to do something with it here pretty soon, because we are expanding a lot south here, and it kind of is an eyesore, so they're probably going to have to do something with it here soon. But it is a historic building, very cool to look at, but a little problematic for the area. But let's talk about the fire. So, 1871, city of Chicago, population 300,000 people, made entirely out of two things, cast iron and wood, and maybe a little bit of hope thrown in there too. But cast iron and wood is actually very flammable, and it gave the city of Chicago a melting point of 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which sounds like a lot, but it's not. And with the city, unfortunately, mysteriously caught on fire on the night of October the 8th, 1871, the city didn't stand a chance. Like I said, that fire burned down 2/3 of the city of Chicago, 17,000 buildings destroyed, 100,000 people left homeless, 250 people confirmed dead. And I apologize if this next bit is a little macabre, but 250 people confirmed dead, but they speculate that it's a lot more, because due to the nature of the tragedy, it was a little bit difficult to identify people. But we know that where this fire started, we just don't know how. There's a very popular story, or urban legend at this point, of Catherine O'Leary and her cow Daisy. If you haven't heard the story, it goes like this. Catherine O'Leary went down to her barn on the night of October the 8th, 1871, allegedly, to milk her cow, Daisy. Daisy, the cow, allegedly, was feeling a little antsy, kicked over an oil lamp that was set up, which caught the barn on fire, and coincidentally, 66% of the city, and killed 300 people in 2 days. We found out later that that story was actually bogus, completely made up by one journalist from the Chicago Republic, who would later admit that he had never met the O'Learys in his life, and that he fabricated that story off the top of his head because his editors had been pressuring him so hard to write anything at all about the Chicago fire, and that is unfortunately for the O'Learys what he invented. But by the time we discovered that, it was too late. We'd already run the O'Learys out of town and blamed them all for the fire ever since. And some people still do. Despite the fact, and this is true, in 1997 we held a public exoneration ceremony for the entire O'Leary lineage, forgiving them of any, quote, imagined crimes against the city. So they flew in from all over the country. They're also still here locally. The O'Learys are still actually a really big police family in the city. So they all came in to celebrate, to be forgiven for the fire. And not only were the O'Learys here, you guys, a real descendant of the cow Daisy was on stage with them. So all humans and bovines alike have officially been forgiven for the fire, but a lot of people will still to this day believe the old O'Leary tale. There's another theory that it was a meteor shower that night, because there was, just not in Chicago. There's a meteor shower in parts of Wisconsin and like western Michigan, specifically around Peshtigo, Wisconsin, that caught on fire at exactly the same time and the same day that we did. So we figure there might be some correlation there, but there's no physical evidence to support that. And there's so many theories, you guys. Like there's one that Catherine O'Leary burned down the barn on purpose because she was selling milk without paying taxes on it, which is not true at all. We checked. There's another one that the O'Leary's son had a lot of gambling debts and the mob burned down the barn. But we asked them, they were nowhere near the barn. They had perfect alibis for the night, so it wasn't them. And honestly, you guys, we could be here for the rest of the tour talking about every theory about how the fire might have started, but the real honest truth is twofold. Number one, it's a bit hard to say because we don't know. And number two, we have more things to talk about on an architecture tour. Like here on the left-hand side, nothing. However, it's about to be quite something in a bit. From the Roosevelt Road Bridgeway behind us to these two permanently stuck up, historically preserved, always open railroad bridges that we don't let down anymore because they have nowhere to go. This area between the bridges, this is about 13 million square feet of space, which is like 63 acres, being developed by one firm, Related Midwest, into what's called the 78, because it's going to be Chicago's 78th neighborhood, a planned community to pop up here around 2040, which is a long time from now, but it is one firm and they got their hands full. But over here on the left-hand side, we're coming up on a couple of things. So we're coming up here on Ping Tom Park, and then we're going to come up on Chicago's Chinatown, and then Pingtown Park Part 2, and then a very cool bridge. But one thing at a time. Here on the left-hand side, so this was the northern end of Pingtown Park. Think of Pingtown Park here as like one giant park split in half by the bridge with two vibes, two sides. So this is more of like a natural park. You have a really nice little nature walk around all the foliage down here, and it's going to start to look really nice here whenever these fall colors start to come out here. But it is still very nice even today. You guys can walk around. You kind of go through the nature walk. You go over the Chicago River like those guys, and then you go back in and around and enjoy the rest of your nature walk down here. So this is named after prominent Chinatown civic leader Ping Tom, who passed away in 1979, but this was sort of his idea. So when we moved our Chinatown over here into the early 1970s, this was all like broken and abandoned rail yards down here. And so Ping Tom wanted to turn it into something that the folks in Chinatown could enjoy, just hang out down here next to the river. But he passed away shortly after coming up with the idea for it, but his crew was so inspired by him, they continued it without him until he opened up the park to the public in 1998, just as he wanted. You guys see up there on the left, those brick mid-rises behind the parkway? Those are residentials that mark the northernmost end of Chicago's Chinatown. Our Chinatown is about a 10-block radius inside of the main Chinatown area. As of last year, 12,000 people live inside of our 10-block radius Chinatown area down here. There's a lot of different restaurants, over 100 recorded restaurants inside. There's also all sorts of different art exhibits, art installations, walkways, pathways, archways, grocery stores, bakeries, apothecaries, cultural shops, and so much more, making Chicago's Chinatown, in my semi-professional opinion, a must-stop in the Chicago area. If you guys want my Chinatown recommendations, you just gotta ask. I know a lot of fun spots. But here on the left-hand side, so this is the main end of Pingtown Park, more like a commercial park. We see with like the more cut grass and like the wider spaced out trees. This pavilion here in the middle, designed by artist Ernie Wong in 1998, is actually where we held the opening ceremony for Pingtown Park, right inside of there. Up in front of us, and soon to be on our right-hand side, is the aforementioned very cool bridge. So we're coming up here on what is now called the Amtrak Bridge. Originally it was called the Canal Street Bridge. We just kind of moved around where Canal Street is. But it's the Amtrak Bridge right now because that's really the only train that goes over it anymore. But it's one of the last remaining vertical lift bridges in the United States. Here's how it works. There are two 190-foot towers. On either end, you have these 3.5-ton concrete slabs. So when they let down those weights, they go down at the same time. So it's a 7-ton counterweight connected with all those giant chains you see going down from the weights all the way into that centerpiece there. So it's a counterweight system. So those go down and the centerpiece will go up to a maximum height of 130 feet. However, the Amtrak Bridge is, and the correct term for this, super old. It was built in 1904. So they only open it up as high as it needs to anymore and then lower it right back down after that. It's currently undergoing its first paint job since 1904, painting it a sort of like darker black color, but we can see with the old paint job, the gray still at the bottom. That house at the top is a storage house they still use, and their bridge house is in towards Chinatown a little bit more. But as we start heading, we're turning around, heading back down the South Branch of the Chicago River. Right now, I'm gonna take a brief pause here in the tour, let you guys soak it all in. I know it's a lot. Again, my name's Alex. I've been doing this since 2016. At the end of last year, I did my 2,800th tour. I only say that so you know. If you have any questions, I am so happy to answer them. Anything you want to know, I'm so happy to talk about it. If you want to know more about a building, want to know about a building we didn't talk about, or the river, the lake, the city, food, hey, anything, please come up and ask away. If not, feel free to go downstairs, grab something to drink, and we'll pick up the tour here in a few minutes. Thanks for listening. This one here on the left, it is an abandoned office building, but I think there might be a couple people still kind of holding out inside, maybe? Because I see some lights on, but I haven't heard anything about anyone buying any space in there. up ahead of us on the right hand side. So sort of like 1 o'clock to us. So you guys see up ahead, like 1 o'clock, a little bit to the right. Dark black glass panel windows with the light gray glass balcony kind of jutting off the outside here. It's kind of a weird pattern. So that is 35 West Van Buren, built in 2014. It had it's one of a lot of awards for its interesting design because the balconies on the outside, get this, spell out the building's address in Morse code. Come on, how cool is that? It's a little impractical, but it's still very cool. Over there on the right-hand side as well, at like 2 o'clock to us. So you guys see up there on the right, beautiful limestone tower with those cascading setbacks pointing inwards towards the top, the black vertical line windows up the center face. You have that trapezoid-shaped tin-paneled roof, and most notably, a statue on the top. That is the Chicago Board of Trade, designed in 1930 to Halliburton Reef. That statue up at the top is Ceres, the Roman goddess of grain, wheat, and agriculture, and she does not have a face. The artist who put her up there, his name is John Storr, S-T-O-R-R, he said, when asked why there's not a face on the statue, and I am directly quoting him, he said, "No one can build anything taller than it, so why bother?" Very interesting choice of words, John, seeing as it's dwarfed between a lot of buildings around it even today and all across the United States as well. But at the time, he had a pretty good point, because for a quarter century and 45 stories, the Chicago Board of Trade there was actually the tallest building in the city for a little bit. Up ahead of us on the right-hand side, you guys see up here, with the rose pink granite and those cascading setbacks going away from the building this time, with that rose pink granite and the octagonal tower going up at the top there, that is 311 South Wacker Drive. At the top of 311, which is 1984, you guys see at the top there's cylinder fixtures hooked to the roof. There's 5 of them, 1 big one, 4 small ones around it. So those house 1,400 fluorescent light fixtures, and they can set any color of their choice. So for any events or sporting events or holidays and whatnot, they can set that to whatever they want to. So like my favorite is around Halloween, because they'll have an orange and then like green at the top, so it's like a little pumpkin. Or if like the Cubs are doing okay, it'll be blue and red. The Bears are doing okay, it'll be navy and orange. Haven't seen that in a long time. Fingers crossed, it's gonna happen this year, I'm feeling it. But here on the right hand side, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Here it is, the Willis Tower, the tallest building in the city of Chicago. 1,453 feet, 442 meters. It's designed what's called a tubular bundled construction pattern, which means it's not one building, it is 9 of them. It is 9 75-foot wide tubes, or from our perspective, boxes, bundled together in different visibly marked locations to allow for the maximum amount of durability and support. The base of the Willis Tower is made out of around 2 million cubic feet of concrete, which is enough concrete at the base of the tower to make a 5-lane highway for 8 miles. It's also surrounded by 28 acres, which is roughly the size of Grant Park here in the city, of this thick black aluminum stretched along the outside of it. A lot of people do ask. They say, "Alex, that's cool. Also, why the name change? Why is it no longer the Sears Tower?" And the answer to that, honestly, unfortunately, it's a little bit more simple than you might think. So the Sears company, then Sears and Roebuck, the catalog company, they had a lot of the upper floors of the building until they moved out in 1990 and 1996, trying to save some money. Left those upper floors vacant until 2009, when in walks the Willis Insurance Group from Great Britain. And they said, "Hey, we noticed you have got a whole bunch of empty, expensive floors that no one's been inside of since 1996. We would like to buy 3 of them today, right now. But," then they hit us with the old 1-2. They said, "But not without the naming rights for the tower thrown into that deal for free, or else we walk right now." And to make a long story very short, we wanted to sell it to them real bad, and we said okay, and now it's the Willis Tower. And it will be until 2029, because they only got the naming rights as part of that deal for 20 years. So due to the original contract, their naming rights are going to definitely end in 2029, and they have to get them a second time, just like anybody else. And this time, probably not for free. But it could be something else after that, but I think it's a moot point, because everybody within 1,000 miles of Chicago is going to call it the Sears Tower out of spite until we're dead. So I don't know if it matters what we call it in the end. But over here on the right-hand side, we're coming up here in the Hartford Plaza. 4 office towers.
Love the water, guys. This is your boy. Could be out here all day. cool, sipping a martini, margarita. Let's go.
A lot of people seem to have this weird like Mandela effect memory that used to spin around in a circle. It never did. Because spinning around in circles with expensive wine and caviar all night is like not an awesome time for anybody, so it never did that. But the Lake Point Tower is interesting architecturally, mostly because of the way it is shaped. So the round corners are called lobes. There's 3 of them. In between the lobes, on all 3 faces of the building, you have these giant glass indentations. It is called an undulating glass curtain wall. And it gives the building this very aerodynamic shape. The Lake Point Tower is so aerodynamic, it could actually withstand up to and including Category 4 hurricane-level wind speeds without any additional bracing required on the inside or outside, which sounds a little spooky, but in the early 70s. So the concrete cage provides a bit more extra shade in the summertime, so you save some money on cooling costs. And number 2, it just makes it easier to clean the windows, because all the window washers have to do is just step out under the cage, tether to it, walk around it to clean it off. Dangerous? Yes. Effective? Also yes. Here on our right-hand side, this one's a doozy, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange Center. Designed in 1979, architects Fujikawa and Johnson. 2 40-story office towers with an 11-story connector piece that used to be the training floor. These 2 towers, when they first came up, had a massive design flaw that the engineers accidentally overlooked, which caused the towers at first to be too top-heavy. And they started to bend away from each other into this giant V shape, which is, to put it bluntly, terrifying. So to fix that, as an emergency countermeasure over the course of like 10 days, what they did is they had to take every floor from the 11th at the top of the training floor up to the 30th out of 40, and stagger 19 floors of these massive towers towards the opposite tower, 1/8 of an inch, a little bit more, each floor going up. So in essence, the weight from the bottoms would pull the tops together and balance them on top of each other through gravity, fixing their problem for now. Over here on our right-hand side is the beautiful Chicago Civic Opera Building, a gorgeous building on the inside and out front and back. 2 styles of architecture on one building. On the back here we have this Art Deco, again with the strong vertical lines, geometric ornamentation, setbacks, limestone. You guys take a look underneath the windowsills. You see these hand-carved theater mask motifs underneath all the windowsills, and then around the very top of the lower indentation here that we can see from this space. We also see more of them here as decoratives on the corner. Those continue around to the face of the building, where you have a different but similar style of architecture, which I know we can't see, but it's just so beautiful I have to mention it. On the other side of Wacker Drive is a French neoclassic facade, a nod to classic French operettas, you guys, with this beautiful 2-story French colonnade, and more of those hand-carved theater mask motifs. If you guys get a chance to peek right inside, try to catch a glimpse of that jaw-dropping 3,500-seat auditorium for the Chicago Lyric Opera, who's been inside since 1955. Here on our right-hand side is the new Bank of America Tower, finished in March of 2020, so relatively new. 53 stories tall, approximately 612 feet. But you guys see here at the base, see this glass indent at the base? This is designed actually in the same general size and shape of the building it replaced. Which I think is pretty cool. It's called 110 North Wacker Drive, sort of a squat little 6-story office building, but they demolished it to make room for the new one, but they just designed the base in the same general shape of the old one, just to pay homage to what was here before it, to pay respect to the land that was here before it was. Speaking of which, we're coming up on another important piece of land here in the city, and I say that with all sincerity. Not a lot of Chicagoans know the importance of a little piece of our own backyard here on the South Branch, right over here on our right-hand side. It's not the Starbucks. We have plenty of those, I promise.
Right.
What I'm looking at are the 2 red brick buildings here in the corner. So you see the small one in the middle squished in the center in 1902, and then the larger add-on to it here in the corner in 1922, collectively making what is the Great Lakes Building. But the Great Lakes Building is actually nowhere near as important as the land that it sits on, because it was right here in this spot in 1860, we had a temporary building called the Wigwam. Inside of said wigwam, we held the 1860 National Republican Convention, which is where we nominated Abraham Lincoln to run for the 16th President of the United States. Right over there. He actually won by 2 votes. Ohio changed their mind at the last second, which called for a recount, and then he won by 2 votes. So we are making our way back down the main branch of the Chicago River, making our way downtown, walking fast, faces past. We are homebound. Here on the right-hand side of the curved green glass, this is 333 West Wacker Drive. Architects here, Cohn, Pedersen, Fox. The year is 1983. The curve of the green glass. Here's a cool architectural term for you guys. The curve of the green glass represents what you call contextualism in architecture. Contextualism is whenever the shape of a building is inspired by or is in context with the shape of the land around it. In this case, the Chicago River. Its next door neighbor up here on the right hand side is 225 West Wacker Drive. I'm going to tell you right now, there are a lot of bridge themes happening on this building. You see, first though, at the base, you see that sort of like green marble inlay at the bottom? It's exactly the same marble from 333 across the road, because it's the same firm, and they had leftover materials, and they thought it looked really nice. But you see, in between the windows, you guys see those bolted steel plates, looking very similar to the same bolted steel on the Franklin Street Bridge dead ahead. The whole roof of 225 is designed in the shape of a bridge, with two raised end pieces and a lower dip in the center. There's also a bridge-shaped connector piece between the two towers up there at the top. These bridge themes are all put into place because it's built between a couple of bridges. And as you may have noticed, we've got more than a couple of bridges in Chicago. In total, we have 53 objects that are defined as bridges. Of them, 38 are openable, operational drawbridges. 38 openable bridges is the most in the country, second in the world, and losing by a long shot to Amsterdam. But we still open up these bridges every May and November, Wednesday and Saturday morning for the beginning and end of our boating season. However, over the last 5 years, recreational boating on the Chicago River has actually tripled. So we've had to add more time for even more boats to get out onto the lake. So we did that by extending the time these bridges open, from the 2 weeks before and the 2 weeks after, May and November, but still Wednesday and Saturday mornings. That way we don't block traffic from here to Gary like every day. These bridges operate what is called a bascule trunnion drawbridge system. Fancy word for counterweight. 8-ton counterweights cranked up by 108 horsepower motors. They can crank up both sides of the bridge simultaneously or one side individually. Really just kind of depends on need for it. Sometimes it depends per bridge as well. Over here on our right hand side, right now at eye level, is the aforementioned brand new Chicago Riverwalk. So the Riverwalk was finished in 2016. It has brought so much life into downtown Chicago. You guys, the difference is unrecognizable. You can walk all the way from the junction now even into Navy Pier. So the Riverwalk connects all of downtown Chicago's major tourist attractions into one cohesive walkway. All sorts of great stuff to see along the way. There's a little gelato shop down there that I love so much. There's also different restaurants, coffee shops. There's the Tiki Lounge. There's kayak rentals, boat rentals, places to hang out like the Riverside Theater over here, and all sorts of great stuff to see. So make sure you guys check it out while you're in town. Here on our right-hand side, though, back to business. You guys see this blue glass high-rise here in the corner? So this is 111 West Wacker Drive. If we're looking at 111, sort of like dead on at the face, you guys see on the left side of the tower, there's a more transparent panel of glass. See those windows that look different from the panels around them going up on the left there? Makes a hallway in the middle and does it again at the top. It snakes around the top of the building. That is called a reveal. Typically, a reveal is designed to reveal something very specific about a building. In the case of 111, though, this is more to be like a general reveal, just so that you can see inside of it a bit better, and so you can tell it's a residential building just by looking right at it. Here on the right-hand side is 77 West Wacker Drive. Architect Ricardo Beauville and James DiStefano wanted to mix Greek and Roman into one building. You'll see Greek if you look at the top, with a temple up at the top there, modeled exactly after the Greek Parthenon. And then you see the Roman motifs at the base, with the columns and archways by the windows. Speaking of columns, up ahead of us on the right-hand side here, this black and gray granite structure over here on the right-hand side, designed as a column within a column, is 35 West Wacker Drive, better known as the Leo Burnett Building, home of the Leo Burnett Advertising Company. Who's come out with such characters like the Jolly Green Giant, the Pillsbury Doughboy, Ronald McDonald, Snap, Crackle, and Pop, Tony the Tiger, the Keebler Elves, the Meow Mix theme song, all came out of here. Up ahead of us and a little bit to the right. So you guys see up ahead? See the Morton Steakhouse sign? Behind it, with a pretty notable green bricks and a golden tower at the top. That is the Carbide and Carbon building, designed in 1929, now home of the Pendry Hotel, designed by the Burnham brothers, the sons of that legendary Chicago architect, Daniel Burnham. They designed that building in protest to the Prohibition, designed to look like a champagne bottle on purpose. And believe you me, they were well aware of what they were up to. And that, to top it off, is actual 24-karat gold leaf wrapped around the top of the tower. Here on our right-hand side with the tower up at the top, 4 small temples called Tempiettes and a large temple at the top called a Belvedere, sitting atop of 35 East Wacker Drive, the old Jewelers building. When the Jewelers building first came up here in 1925, it actually had a driveway that would go around it, underneath it, into an underground elevator shaft that you could only access if you were a jeweler. What you would do is you would drive around the driveway into the secret underground elevator for your car, ride that elevator in your car up to your office floor, pull out and park your car in the hallway. They did that to make it safer for jewelers. You see, that way they didn't have to leave their car in the middle of gangster-era Chicago with pockets full of diamonds, and then also people like Al Capone and all of his friends somewhere else outside. Here on our right, in between the Royal Sonesta and the London House Hotel,
That's where we
the
stayed,
famous
London
skyscraper
House.
sandwiched
Was tight,
in
baby.
time, the old Mather Tower.
That's where we were
Finished
at.
in 1929.
Yeah.
Originally, it was going to be two towers,
Stop.
architects Riddle and Riddles, two brothers, two towers, but the second one fell victim to the Depression, and where the second tower would have stood, now stands the glass add-on for the London House Hotel. But the London House is actually twofold. So it is two buildings, but it's one place. So it's the glass add-on in 2016 and the limestone portion here on the corner, which was here first in 1923. It's the London Guarantee and Accident Building, designed in 1923, and it's 23 stories tall, designed in the French Beaux-Art style, which is defined by a decorative base, a stack of floors, and a decorative top. Behind said decorative top is a rooftop bar for the now London House Hotel that provides an outstanding view of the downtown Chicago area. If you guys want to check out the rooftop bar, you'll be here for a little bit. So every week, Sundays from 12 to 2, they have a brunch special that'll save you some money up there. If you guys want to go up then, I will warn you, it is not food brunch, it's mimosas brunch, so eat before you go. But it's still a pretty awesome view up there, worth checking out. Let's take a look here on the left-hand side real quick. We're going to see another one of our historic buildings downtown, the Chicago Tribune Tower. Here to the left-hand side, the beautiful Gothic cathedral-esque top, those 8 flying buttresses hooked into the top center tower. So the Chicago Tribune Tower was designed in 1925, was the result of a nationwide competition held in 1922 to design the most beautiful office tower in the world. And the clear winner was Raymond Hood and John Howell's Neo-Gothic design, based off the Malines, also called the Mechelen Cathedral in Belgium. It was offices until 2019, where they transformed them into condominiums. Units inside going anywhere from $800,000 to $30 million. Really good. So, real quick side note about that. So, for like living units downtown, it's mostly, especially close to the river, is almost entirely view dependent, which is why the prices of the units vary so wildly. Because it depends on exactly what buildings you can see, how important are those buildings, what body of water can you see, how high up you are, and all sorts of other stuff. But it's almost all view dependent as per what you're paying for your unit. But here on the right hand side, you guys see there with the white sides and the black vertical line windows? That is the Aon Center, currently the 4th tallest building in the city at 1,136 feet, 345 meters, all office space inside. Designed in 1973 by Edward Durrell Stone, it was the tallest building in the world for 4 months, until the Sears Towers finished the same year. But you guys see up here on the right, in between the buildings to the right, kind of back between them, behind them, you see back up there, with the curving, undulating concrete floor slabs, like this. It's also got the water drop motif along the outside, you see there? That is the aptly named Aqua Tower, designed in 2009 by Illinois-based architect Jeannie Gang. It's 859 feet tall. The bottom 20 floors are the first Blue Radisson Hotel, and the rest of it is all condominium living space. But here's the thing, at 859 feet, right here in Chicago, Jeannie Gang's Aqua Tower is currently the 2nd tallest building in the world, designed by a female principal architect. Now, you might be wondering, well, Alex, okay, where is the tallest building in the world designed by a female principal architect? I see a couple of you guys already know, but if you haven't, here's a clue. It's a lot closer than you think it is. It's right there, over here on our right-hand side. Check it out. Jeannie Gang's brand new project and the newest addition to Chicago's iconic city skyline is the St. Regis Chicago. The St. Regis is 4 interlocked towers, all going up to the tallest of 4. Interlocked means that it looks like multiple buildings, but it's really just one cohesive structure. The tallest of the towers goes up to 1,198 feet, which is 362 meters, making it officially the 3rd tallest building in the city of Chicago, and proud to say, so right here in Chicago, Illinois, the tallest building in the world, designed by a female principal architect. And one of our own, too, Jeannie Gang, who's from Rockford, Illinois. But if you guys look up towards the top, you're going to see a floor that doesn't have any windows. That's where I live. It's the 83rd floor. It's a pretty nice view. But it's actually called a blow-through floor. There's nothing inside of that floor. It's all entirely hollow except the elevator shaft that goes through. So a blow-through floor does exactly what you might think it does. So with the original design of the St. Regis here, they had a whole lot of problems with like a lot of wind pressure building up right there around the 83rd floor. And they did a lot of tests to try to figure out like why that was happening and then what to do about it. What they landed on was, just get rid of the problem. So they took the 83rd floor, extended it by 5 feet, and then took it out of the design. And that way all the wind pressure that was building up there suddenly had somewhere to go, which in this case is through the tower itself, slowing down the wind sway at the top down to just about a net zero. As we pull forward here on the main branch of the Chicago River, I do want to tell you guys a bit more about the Chicago River before our tour begins to come to a close. The Chicago River, in all directions, is 156 miles long, it's an average of 22 feet deep, and is one of the first and only rivers in the world to be reversed by human hands and stay that way. In the 1850s, we started using the river as a giant trash can / toilet thing, throwing all of our personal and industrial waste into the river. There were a lot of meatpacking plants down the south branch of the river that would do this really cool thing, where they would take all of their rotting animal carcasses and then throw them into the Chicago River. Somehow made even worse because that water used to flow from west to east. That means that water used to flow into Lake Michigan, which is and was, say it with me now, our drinking water supply. Right, so because of that, hundreds of people died all the time of cholera, typhoid, and or dysentery and other preventable waterborne diseases. But in 1892, the city of Chicago was finally given some federal funding to do something about that. And in traditional Chicago fashion, we go big or go home. And what we decided to do was reverse the flow of the Chicago River by hand forever and call it a day. A bit easier said than done, but here's what happened. We went down to where the Chicago River used to start. So this is like southwest of the city. If anybody's familiar with Illinois, this is like Oak Lawn, Chicago Ridge-ish, but just southwest of Chicago. Built a big dam up, let the water build up one side and then drain out the other. Out through the other side, we dug a canal called the Sanitary and Ship Canal, 26 miles across, to connect the Chicago River into the Des Plaines River headed south at a 37-foot lower sea level. So when we burst open this dam on January 2nd, 1900, which, by the way, side note, we did in the most Chicago way imaginable by blowing up this dam to smithereens with a whole bunch of dynamite, 4 guys at 3:30 in the morning without telling anybody. So we burst open this dam, and what you know, the water that was being held back suddenly had somewhere to go, which was backwards, very quickly, being pulled much more intensely the 37-foot drop into the Des Plaines than it was from the very gentle pull from the lake. So this gravitational domino effect took over, and through the force of gravity, we did it. We reversed the flow of the Chicago River by hand forever and called it a day since January 2nd, 1900. Now, Captain Peter is going to get ourselves turned around and give you guys this beautiful downtown skyline view of downtown Chicago. So great photo opportunity for you guys. Didn't want you to miss it while we're down here, so really awesome photo op for you guys. Just a friendly reminder, we ask that you please, no matter your height, no matter your age, or any photo opportunities, we ask that you please do not stand on the seats or the benches. You can stand, it's totally fine. Just not on the seats and not on the benches, please. But we'll pick up the tour here in a few minutes. But 2 quick announcements before we do that. Number 1, we have an alcohol. Work on finishing that. You cannot take it off the boat, so you have to finish it before we get off. And secondly, tour aside, just from me to you, human being to human being, I want to let you know, we close our bathrooms down in a couple of minutes to clean them up for the next round of people coming in. And I want you to know that in the same amount of space, wrapping around the face of the building, facing the lake. Those 2 floors sold in 2017 for $13.5 million. Was vacated in 2021, is now up for sale right now for about $19 million, which is a lot of money, but for what you get, it is not a bad price, honestly. Because with that, you will get your own half-court basketball court, an indoor-outdoor swimming pool, a 25-person jacuzzi, and a 4-bedroom condominium, each with unobstructed sunrise views of Lake